Emergency podcast. We don't do too many of these, but we had to jump behind the mics here on Rail Talk to talk about the Louisiana Racing Commission's decision to loosen drug regulations. I'm Joe Bianca. I'm an ownership advisor at West Point Thoroughbreds.
Jonathan Green, general manager of DJ Stable. And Joe, I'm glad we're getting on to air our thoughts on this because we have a lot, not only from multiple different vantage points and lenses. So let's get right into it.
There's so many things to say about this. I'm going to quote our old friend Bill Finley over at the TDN. The Louisiana Racing Commission has passed a set of emergency rules set to go into effect on June 8th that will create what are arguably the most lenient set of medication regulations in the sport. The withdrawal times for several medications have been reduced. The list includes controversial bronchodilator clenbuterol, which can now be given to a horse within 72 hours of racing. And John, there were a lot of rumors about this. Horses that were running at fairgrounds in the winter, in the spring, going to other tracks and running out of their minds. And a lot of people were saying it was because they still had clenbuterol in their system. They also have reduced the withdrawal times for injections. This is just so outrageous in so many ways. And I think there's a lot of takeaways. To me, the main takeaway here is this is why HISA is needed. Because before HISA came along, every state could do this. Right now, it's really just Louisiana, Texas, and West Virginia who are off the grid and can just be a rogue state and do their own thing. But before, every state in America was welcome to have the loosest drug regulations possible. And this is another reason you can't trust the racing commissions and the HBPAs to do the right thing by the horses on their own. This is why there needs to be some sort of overarching regulation to whip states into shape and say, hey, you're not going to make things less safe for the horses if we have something to say about it. John, I've so much more to say. I'm disgusted by this, but I'll toss it to you.
Yeah, and Joe, I hope we can go a couple minutes each, and so we can catch our breath also, because there's so many different reasons why this is just befuddling and doesn't make any sense. But thank you for bringing up first and foremost the fact that they are outside of the legal purview of HISA. And you mentioned the three jurisdictions, the states, Louisiana, West Virginia, and Texas, that are basically thumbing their nose at the rest of the industry by saying, hey, you know what? Those rules, that's good for you guys. But down here, we like to be under our own set of rules. And they're proving it time and time again. So where do you start? I mean, you start with the horses, because ultimately that's the the lifeblood of our sport is the fact that the horses have to be safe and have to run under the right kind of medication rules for their own benefit. Because again, they can't tell us when they're hurting. They can't tell us when they're feeling better. They can't tell us what's bugging them. So we have to be the voice for them, and that's why we wanted to have unified rules in place. So the fact that Louisiana basically took it upon themselves to basically say, hey, you know what, your rules are cool, but we're going to go by our own rules, led by these active emergency rules of racing. The commissioner, executive director, Stephen Landry, and the assistant executive director, Gerald Calagero, if I'm saying that correctly, have implemented this set of rules. And they're implementing it, Joe. It's like next week. I think it's June 8th is when they want to go ahead and start putting this into play. So it's not even like, hey, we're floating this balloon out there because this is what we want to do. No, they're freaking putting it in. I mean, that's what it is. So the problem is multi-level. Number one is on the horses, because if we all agree as an industry that the HISA rules are the way to go, then they are very different and very much more safety conscious for the horses than what Louisiana is trying to implement in this, again, active emergency rules racing. That's number one. And again, first and foremost. Number two is, how would you like to be Churchill Downs right now? And where one of the jewels of your ownership is the fact that they own the fairgrounds. And the fairgrounds, if you know, Joe, a little geography exam here, fairgrounds is in Louisiana. And basically they're coming out and they're saying, nope, we're not going to go by the rules of anyone else. So, so that's too bad. And then fairgrounds is kind of caught in the middle, like, guys, we have to abide by your state rules because we're in that jurisdiction. But Big Brother, Churchill Downs owns us. And Churchill Downs quote I thought was great. It came out from Tanya Abelin, the vice president of communications of CDI, who said these emergency rules are weakening. Churchill Downs Incorporated is extremely disappointed with the Louisiana Racing Commission's quote unquote emergency rulemaking to weaken Louisiana racing medical standards. We had no opportunity to weigh in on this action and view it as inexcusable abuse of the process, resulting in a substantial degradation in safety and integrity of racing in the state. Sounds like they're going to get a whooping behind the woodshed, as they say down in Louisiana.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing. That's one of the facets of this is like, I don't know what Churchill Downs can do specifically, but they're essentially the boss in the most major track in Louisiana, which is Fairgrounds. So I don't know what say they can have if they can go, on their own a little bit and put pressure on the track officials at Fairgrounds to have stricter rules. But it seems like the Racing Commission probably has jurisdiction over them. But Churchill, does have a bit of leverage, I would think, owning Fairgrounds. And this is like, it hurts Louisiana racing, like vastly hurts Louisiana racing, because, if you were trying to play the game the right way and not run against, probably juiced up horses, why the fuck would you go down to Louisiana and race? And then secondly, it might put Louisiana on an island. And Lisa Lazarus had a quote kind of pertaining to this, that, we have to examine the way that we allow horses from Louisiana to ship to other jurisdictions and run, because it's not fair. Like I alluded to in the open, like that at Keeneland, the Fairgrounds horses were running off the screen a lot of times, and people had their suspicions about why that was. It's going to be very, very difficult and a tough sell to horsemen to let Fairgrounds and Louisiana horses ship to other states and start winning races because they're running a different set of rules than everybody else. And this is a big deal. No offense to anyone who participates or supports Texas racing or West Virginia racing, but they're not that relevant. Those states are not that relevant on a day-to-day basis. You basically got one big card at Sam Houston, one big card at Mountaineer. If you want to count the Charlestown Classic card, maybe two in West Virginia. But Fairgrounds has a whole set of Kentucky Derby and Kentucky Oaks preps. How could you trust any of the results from those preps going forward? This is a major, major black eye. And the other thing I wanted to mention is that Louisiana also already has a pretty bad reputation in terms of horses going to slaughter. So this is, if anything, Louisiana needs more regulation and more protection for the horses. And I just wanted to read the quote from the guy from the HBPA. Bernard Chatters is his name, very, very Louisiana name, president of the Louisiana HBPA. He says, these new rules are good and they will help us to be effective horsemen. I like them. The rules on these medications are well thought out. Yeah, sounds like it. And will let horsemen practice their trade and help veterinarians do their job effectively. I guess it all depends on what you consider a veterinarian's job to be.
Right.
I am happy with these changes. I can tell you that. They are trying to do what is right for the animals. Bullshit meter goes 1,000 right there. I imagine they changed the rules to try to allow the horse to get optimal care. Are you fucking kidding me? There is no way in the universe you could sell me that these changes are good for the horses. Right. When you reduce withdrawal times for injections and major drugs. It's an embarrassment. And that quote is just there's no data behind it. It's just mainly, I like them. I feel good about this. This is great.
There's no data behind it, and obviously there was no filtering as far as hey, maybe I should run this by somebody in PR. I like it. I can tell you that. If that sounds very Louisiana. No, look, Bernard Chatters, I actually had to look him up because I didn't know who he was, other than the fact that he was the president of the Louisiana HBPA and he races primarily out of Evangeline. He's a smart guy, and he's got smart kids. 4 out of 5 of his kids are literally doctors. I mean, it's not like he's maybe he's uneducated. I don't know, but it's not like he doesn't think that education is important, because obviously his kids, go to the nth degree, the highest degree possible. But here's a guy who races in Evangeline, and according to Equibase, has never trained a stake horse. He's never won a stake horse. So again, I don't know if that's necessarily who you want to have as your spokesperson for Louisiana. Be that as it may, whether he's a good trainer or not a good trainer, the quote was, looked like it was definitely off the cuff. When you say things like, I like it. And, I can tell you that, if that's your backing, I don't think that's necessarily.
Hang up the phone if that's all you got.
Exactly. But let's talk other trainers that this is going to affect. Okay, because you have the super trainers, and you have trainers that have multiple areas of horses in various geographic locations. Brad Cox, Steve Asmussen, Tom Amos, Dallas Stewart, Cherie DeVoe, Mark Casse, Brendan Walsh, Kenny McPeak, Derby winner Kenny McPeak, in case you haven't heard of him, Mike Maker, Joe Sharp. Those are just some of the top trainers that winter or have a barn of horses wintering at the fairgrounds. What do you do if you're those individuals now? I mean, because here's the problem. The problem is that there's only a limited number of racetracks that can offer turf during winter, the winter months. You have Gulfstream, you have Santa Anita, and I know I'm missing a couple, but for all intents and purposes, those are the big, racetracks that are offering allowance stake races, main special weight races on the turf course. So now you're taking that away. If I was Gulfstream Park or Santa Anita's racing office, I'd be getting on the phone right now, calling the majority of those trainers and saying, look, if you want to abide by HISA rules and not be in a situation where you can be taken advantage of by people who aren't playing by the rules, where it's not a fair fight for you, then we had, if you're Gulfstream, we had 600 plus, empty stalls here during the championship meet. I would really like to have them, filled by your additional overflow, Brad Cox or Tom Amos or Kenny McPeak or Cassie or DeVoe or any of the other trainers that I just mentioned. I mean, that would be the first thing I would do is say, this looks like a black eye on horse racing, but man, it's going to help me fill stalls and fill races if I'm the racing office of Gulfstream, Santa Anita, and even New York and Turfway. If you want to go after the non-turf horses, that's the way I would play. I'd be peppering them with stall applications.
Or how about even...
There's already a couple of trainers. There's already a couple of trainers like Cherie DeVoe and Mark Casse who have already publicly denounced, fairgrounds racing. Sorry, Joe, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, and you add to that the smaller trainers who are already struggling to win races at fairgrounds. Why the hell would you stay there? Yep. Obviously people have roots, so it's not that easy to pick up and leave. But the smaller trainers who already are winning 5-10%, what would keep them there now other than that?
Right, exactly. Here's one more thing that I want to throw out there, and I wanted your insight and input on. So now we have this, these rogue states, and you mentioned Texas and West Virginia for the in the grand scheme of things, other than maybe one day a year or a weekend out of the year, their impact on overall racing is de minimis. Okay, and for those of you in those racing jurisdictions, de minimis means not of an important impact. Can we get that? Can we get that on the bottom of the screen? De minimis, which also is like my comments impact on horse racing also is de minimis. Anyway, be that as it may, I digress. This is a situation where, and I think Lisa Lazarus actually said this in one of the articles, like the general public doesn't understand the minutia that we are in with regard to which jurisdictions, which states are under HISA and which ones aren't. All they're going to see is if a horse breaks down at one of those three states that's outside of the jurisdiction of HISA, they're going to see, horse racing did it again, another fatality on the racetrack. They're not going to know that they're not under the scope of HISA. I think this is a perfect opportunity for like a light up racing, since everyone's getting behind light up racing and saying that they need to publicize things. Usually they only publicize good things about racing, which is fine. But this is a time for them to step up and be like, hey, general public, understand that like we're trying to clean this shit up. We're trying to make this better. We're trying to get everyone in line. But you have these rogue states that aren't doing it. So unfortunately, we don't have the power to reside over them if they're not going to be part of our pact with HISA. So therefore, they're on their own. So like, go ahead and do what you need to do as far as protesting them and demonstrating in front of those racetracks, because we agree they're not doing the right thing. Do I think Light Up Racing is going to do that? Hell no. But if they're really going to be the spokesperson of the unified spokesperson of the industry, you need to get out in front of some of these things.
Well, except that my issue with Light Up Racing, a lot of times, like I think that they want to focus on the positive, which I think is a great thing overall. Like they want to be a positive PR machine for the industry. So I don't think that they're necessarily equipped to address issues like this and kind of bring attention to the fact that some states are doing the wrong thing by the horses. So I don't know if that's necessarily going to be their role, but I agree. Like there needs to be some delineation here that, listen, this does not represent the industry.
Right.
Like we are moving in the right direction on drug reform, on fatalities, on racetrack safety. This is taking a step backwards, but it's only going to be in Louisiana. I do think that, and I feel bad for the people who depend on Louisiana racing, but I do think that horsemen and horse players need to take a stand here and not send horses there and not bet on races in Louisiana, because that's the only way to send a message like this shit is not okay. Like you can be happy about these rules, Bernard. They can make you happy and you think they're great and all that shit, but this has an impact on the rest of the industry, and the rest of the industry has the right to tell you, hey, we're not going to support your racing state anymore. Right. And I don't think Louisiana wants that. This is unfortunate. I venture to guess that most people in Louisiana racing are not for this. Right. But again, the HBPAs and the racing commissions, when they are not under the purview of a larger body, can do whatever the fuck they want. Right. And that was the main issue with the system before HISA. And that's why we need a governing body so that the horses are not dependent on a bunch of empty suits and corrupt horsemen potentially doing the wrong thing.
Yeah. I wonder, and again, this is grasping at straws and knowing that this probably won't happen. But I wonder if when the graded stakes committee comes back together, since the way I look at it is it's a pretty objective decision making as far as which races get upgraded or downgraded. If I got to believe that part of their rubric has to be whether or not these racetracks are abiding by HISA, and if it's not, then that should certainly, if it's not in the past, it certainly should be something in the future, because that's the other way that these racetracks sit up and take notice. Is all of a sudden they get all of these graded stake races pulled from them. Again, they'll probably end up in Kentucky. The races will migrate to Kentucky because they never downgrade any stake races. But again, that's another. What?
No, I was just going to say that to me, that's the major point of lever that Churchill has. If they can't change the drug rules, you can take Derby and Oaks qualifying points away from those races at Fairground.
Exactly. Yep. Exactly. And if it's not going to be the graded, that was the next thing I was going to say was you take the points away, and you make it a very difficult situation again for those top racing programs that have Derby and Oaks contenders every year. But you brought up a really good point that I didn't think of, and that's the bread and butter trainers that have horses that are running, Wednesday through Friday at racetracks and are running in the undercard of the races. And look, they need to be able to make a living and be able to try to make money. And if they're honest or not pushing the envelope, but they're competing against other groups that they're never going to get out of their situation. And you saw it at Monmouth, and you're seeing it at Parks, at some of these racetracks where they're very loosey-goosey about their rules, and who's abiding by them, or at least they were in the past pre-HISA, and now they don't stand a chance. Trainers didn't stand a chance at Monmouth when Jason Service and Jorge Navarro were here. They didn't stand a chance at Parks when you had alleged cheaters that were housed there year round, and some of them still are there year round. And it's like, where's the safe haven for these guys? Safe haven is to go to some of these, other racetracks that are under HISA that are now cleaning up some of these trainers that have been pushing the envelope.
One other quick story I wanted to mention in this same vein, David Jacobson got a 30-day suspension for allegedly milkshaking a horse at Penn National, actually an ex-West Point horse in Got Thunder. So we're definitely keeping an eye on him in case he needs a safe place to land for after his racing career. But this is not surprising. Like I know he's back and he's won a bunch of races, but anybody that paid attention to David Jacobson back in the day knows that something untoward is going on in all likelihood. I remember when his horses were running off the screen regularly at Belmont Park. He broke the record for most wins in a meet at the spring summer meet. Every horse seemed like he won by 15 lengths, and everyone just had to be like, that's what a great horseman, what a great climbing trainer. Like, give me a fucking break. Like, there are certain people that should not be around horses, no matter how many races they win, no matter how much money they make people. To me, he's one of those guys. So that was not surprising to me. And he only got 30 days, but I assume that if there's another infraction after that, the suspensions will be bumped up. So yeah, that's just my quick thought on David Jacobson.
Yeah, he has the Jacobson name in New York has a long-standing history on a lot of different levels in racing. I mean, the grandfather was a trainer and won Grade One races, and the dad had a checkered past, I think at best, would be a nice way of saying it. And now David Jacobson took some time off for health reasons and has come back and is now in a situation where, yeah, he's allegedly milkshaking horses. So what a shock, said nobody in East Coast racing. The other one that I noticed just in going through the Heisa Haigwu website is there was a guy named Monty Gelrod racing out of Parks who got an 18-month suspension for cobalting horses. And Joe, I didn't know who he was, but in 2023, he had 8 starters, 2 wins, 2 seconds, and 2 thirds. So that's a 25% win percentage and a 75% in the money percentage, which again, in a very small sample, you'd say, okay, well, maybe he's just kind of an up and coming guy and everything. But then, it didn't surprise me that he got slapped with some kind of suspension. 18 months is a lot. 18 months is a lot of time for a newly minted trainer. But yeah, when you look at a small sample of stats, you have to laugh and say, yeah, this is one that they hopefully that Heisa nipped in the butt before his career started really taking off.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is a little bit of a depressing emergency episode, but I think it's sometimes, at least the silver lining is it's good to have a reminder of why we need the reform in the first place and why it's nonsense when the HBPA guys get up there and say, hey, the system's working great as it is. Clearly it's not, and there's still a lot of work to be done. So hopefully there's a bunch of public outcry, especially about the Louisiana situation. So hopefully we'll get some people to reverse course. And if not, Louisiana is going to be on an island, and it's going to be unfortunate. So thanks, Jon Green, for jumping on real quick. Thanks to our producer, Patty Wolf. Thanks to our associate producers, Nathan Wilkinson and Julia Agresta. Shout out to the sponsors, Facing Tipped in the Green Group and TaylorMade. As always, thanks to you for watching. Rail Talk will be back with a regular episode next week. See you then.